Hello, this is Gary at Jack Raven Bushcraft. Thanks for watching our video. This week I'm going to talk a little bit about bow drilling. So I'm going to divide it up into probably a few videos. For this one I want to look at the component parts of a bow drill set, so the things that you will need. So let's start off with the bow. So typically I'm going to try to find something that's relatively long and straight to make a bow. So this is a piece of hazel. Other things I could use, sycamore stems, ash stems, birch, willow, those kinds of things. What I typically go for is something about sort of thumb thick, and there's a number of reasons for that. If I had a bow that was, you know, kind of 5 centimeters, a couple inches in diameter, it's going to be really heavy, and that's going to make it unwieldy. It's going to make it tiring on my arm as I'm kind of bowing, and it's going to make it difficult for me to get my my technique right. The other end of that spectrum, if I did something that was really thin, then there's a good chance that it's either going to just snap or it's going to bend, and I'm not going to be able to get enough tension on the string. Now I do tend to go with something that is slightly curved, like that. So again, we're not talking about a U shape. If we had something that was U-shaped, again, as you're bowing away, you can imagine the bow's all going to be out this side, and it's going to be really difficult for you to hold on to the thing. So yeah, I go for that kind of curve on it. In terms of length, more or less like that, so more or less into the center of the chest. With everything that I'm going to discuss now, there are always variations, so people do these things in different ways. I'm kind of describing what works for me. Now, so for instance, a much straighter bow, this is the kind of thing advocated by Morris Kahansky, and let's face it, he knows, or he knew, I should say, yeah, God bless his soul, he knew what he was talking about, that fella. So it is always worth trying out different things from different people to find what works for you. I've got I mean, this one, you can see this is massive. This we tend to use for group fire by friction. So if we've got a couple of people doing this, we use a much longer bow, so we've got kind of one person on either end. So that's the bow is fairly straightforward. Yeah, just kind of slightly curved there. Oh, in terms of the string, paracord's going to work. This is 4mm climbing cord that I've used on here. I find this gives just a little bit more purchase onto the spindle, so I like this. But a bit of paracord's going to do the trick. Ultimately, if you sort of, depending on where you want to take your bow drilling adventure, but for a lot of people, ultimately you want to be able to do this from natural cordage. But while you're learning, go with a bit of paracord or maybe some 4mm climbing cord. Then we have the drill or spindle, and so something like this. This one is made from a piece of hazel. If you look online or read various books, you will see a lot of variation in the size of the drill that's used. So you'll see ones that are shorter, probably not an awful lot longer than this, but you will see variation in the diameter of the drill as well. Now I very much prefer to use a drill that is got a little bit longer, so it's about sort of forearm is what I would typically go for. Really pointy at one end. This is the top, and then more sort of dome shaped at the bottom. In terms of diameter, I will typically go for about the thickness of my middle finger. So as I said, there is a lot of variation in this, so people will use drills that are, or I've seen people using drills that are quite a lot thicker. So there's always going to be a trade-off. So if we have a drill that's much thicker, well, clearly we're going to have more resistance down at this end, the end where we want to create the friction. So it will create more friction, it's going to generate that, or grind away our powder and create our heat. But the thicker it is, the more work it's going to be on our arm to do this. And partly that's going to be because the thing is going to spin slower. So that the bigger the diameter, the slower it's going to spin. So the more sort of labour intensive it gets. Whereas if we use something like, so something like this, almost the size of a pencil, well, this is going to spin really, really fast in your bow as you're going along, but there's not an awful lot on the end here to give you the friction to create the heat. The thinner the drill, also the smaller the ember you're going to create. So clearly there's a balance here between being able to get the thing to spin quickly and generating or creating enough friction. And so for me, as I say, it's about that middle finger thickness. So that my recommendation would be to kind of start with something about that. Then we need our hearth board. So this is the bit that we're going to drill into. This has to be made from standing dead. So in fact, I should have said, so does the spindle. It has to come from standing dead wood. It needs to be as dry as we can possibly find. In terms of thickness, again, I'm just going to go about that middle finger thick. So when you're drilling down into it, if you've got a really thick piece of wood, so imagine it was kind of that sort of thickness, then that's a big notch that I need to carve into my wood, and it's a big notch that I need to fill up with dust before I'm able to create my ember. Again, if I had a piece of wood that was, or a hearth board that was really, really thin, then there's a good chance I'm just going to drill straight through it before I've had the opportunity to create my ember. So yeah, as I say, about yay thick. In terms of materials, I'm going to talk a few now that are in front of me. I'm going to put a little list up at the end of the video so that you can take a look at. And they're ones that I've had personal experience with in this country, so in the UK. And I'll put them up in a rough order of how easy or difficult I've found them to actually use. So here I've got some lime, sycamore, horse chestnut. I haven't actually given this piece a try yet, but horse chestnut is relatively straightforward. Bit of spruce, birch here, alder, clematis. This is a piece of clematis. This one, I don't actually know what this is. It's a bit of pallet wood. So yeah, don't know. So it's worth a try. So I said that I'll put up a list of things in a rough order of how easy or otherwise they might be. So what makes a particular wood easy or otherwise, and as far as I can tell, the best I can tell, it comes down to two things. One is the density of the wood, and the other is the ignition point of the powder that you create when you're bowing away. So the less dense the wood, the easier it is to kind of grind away the dust. So if you've got something like, so this lime for instance, this is fairly low in that density scale. So drilling into this, it's quite straightforward to produce our powder. If you imagine something like, let's just take oak as an example, it's fairly well known for being a dense wood. So that's going to be more difficult to produce the dust from than something like this, something like the lime. And then we come down to this ignition point of the material. So all woods have ignite at slightly different temperatures. So the higher the ignition point, well, the more heat that you have to generate to get your ember to create in there. So if you've got a piece of wood that that is dense and has a high ignition point, that's going to certainly be challenging. Whereas if you've got something that is less dense and has a lower ignition point, that's probably going to be more straightforward. Now, it's going to be really, really difficult, if not impossible, in the field to try to understand what the ignition point is of any given piece of wood. But what we can do is just try to assess how dense a piece of wood is. And the really straightforward way, just kind of get your thumbnail and dig it into the piece of wood. If you can get your thumbnail to make a little dent, a little sort of notch in that piece of wood, it's going to be worth giving a try. Then we move on to our bearing block. So this bit's going to kind of go like that. So it's that kind of thing. Bearing block you want to have from a nice dense piece of wood again. So this one in my hand, I know this is hornbeam. Hornbeam makes a really nice bearing block. I've got here ash. Again, another decent piece of wood. Holly's, as to the best of my knowledge, is the most dense wood in the British Isles. So that's always going to be good for a bearing block. This one was given to me. It's got a bearing from a fidget spinner in it. I'm not overly impressed with it, to be honest. I didn't actually find that it made life an awful lot easier for me, but you kind of see this sort of thing around and about. There are discussions around whether the bearing block should be season wood or green wood. I've tried both and I haven't found a massive difference between either. To an extent, it's just going to come down to what you're able to find on any given day. But certainly go for something that's as dense as you're able to find. And of course, it needs to just fit nice and comfortably in your hand here, so that you can get a decent grip on it. If you live by the coast and you've got a pebbly beach about, then take a look. It's surprising how often you might well find little pebbles like this with a little hole already formed in them. I know people that have made bearing blocks out of pieces of clay. So wet clay, you can then kind of get it in your hand so it's perfectly the right shape for your hand, fire it up and use it that way. So lots of variations on that too. And then the last thing you're going to need is an ember pan. So the ember pan is basically just going to sit under here, under your notch, so that as you're drilling away, the powder has got something to sit in. So that's quite a fancy one that I've carved and had it for a few years now. Doesn't have to be, it could just be it's just a slither of wood, it could be a piece of bark, a leaf, something to keep that ember in one place. So those are our basic components for a bow drilling set. And I just want to take a minute to describe a difference in approach. There are at least two different approaches that I'm familiar with when it comes to making your hearth board and drill. So we've got an approach where we can make both things. So we can make the hearth board and the spindle from the same material. The other approach, a more of a mix and match approach, is that we use a hearth board from one material and a spindle from the other. And to an extent it's going to depend where you were taught and who taught you. My suggestion would be to become familiar with both methods. So for instance, as I said, this is a piece of lime and this is a piece of hazel, so that's going to work perfectly well. I've also got here, this is sycamore, so I've got sycamore hearthboard and 2 sycamore spindles. To an extent, this is going to be dependent on the kind of environment in which you find yourself. So here we're in Kent. We're in an ancient woodland. It's a native broadleaf woodland. We have lots of hazel around. We've got lots of ash, sycamore, birch, all of these species that give us nice long straight saplings. So it's pretty straightforward in this kind of environment to be able to go out and just find something like this that doesn't require much more work than just putting a point on one end and a dome on the other end. You may find yourself in an environment, however, where that is going to be more difficult. It's not so straightforward to find those long thin stems, in which case then it absolutely makes sense to just make them as you go along. It takes a little bit longer to make the stems this way, spindles this way, but nonetheless it is a kind of a thing, something that you might well have to do. My suggestion certainly would be to go out and try both methods, so that you are competent in both, so that whatever scenario you should find yourself in, you know what you need to do to be able to manufacture these sets. So I hope that has been useful to you, just in terms of looking at the various component parts of our bow drill set. The next video I'm going to sort of show how to make these up, so that you can sort of progress with this. I'm hoping to get that one out within the next probably within the next week. So make sure that you don't miss it, guys, by subscribing to our YouTube channel, and we shall see you in the near future. Stay safe.